Good morning. This is Michael Garcia with the Hispanic Vote. I'm the chair, as you guys know. I first want to say Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there watching. We're here on Sunday. We're going to continue our conversations with our local leaders here. And today I have the great pleasure of Joe Scott. Joe is a candidate for the Supervisor of Elections position, and the Hispanic Vote just recently endorsed him. So we're doing this interview so we can have him tell us a little bit more about his background and get the public to know him a little bit more. So Joe, thank you for coming this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So Joe, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Are you married, kids?
Sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I've actually been married for 16 years to my wife Shannon, and we have a 12-year-old son who's getting ready to go into 7th grade at West Glades Middle School.
Okay.
So so that's my family life. That's pretty much everything revolves around those two.
So where do you live? Where do you live?
I live in Parkland.
Okay.
I live in Parkland for past 4, maybe 6 years now, something like that. I forget how many years, but since 2014. So we've been living in Parkland for a few years now.
So Joe's a unique candidate, and there's some things that we want to highlight so the public gets to know him. One of the things that's really impressive about Joe and why we endorse him is his service to the country and his background. Joe, tell us a little bit about your service to the country and your educational background.
Sure. So I actually grew up military. Moving all over the world, spent a big chunk of my childhood in Germany, and wanted to serve in the military myself as an adult. So I applied and went through the rigorous process of getting accepted into West Point. And when I graduated from West Point, I served as I ended up serving as an armor officer. I spent my first 2.5 years on active duty. I was over in South Korea, very close to the demilitarized zone. In a cavalry unit there, and then my last year before I got out, I actually was stationed. I actually did a tour of duty in Iraq, where I was embedded with the Iraqi army. I was embedded with an Iraqi infantry battalion, lived with the Iraqi army for a year. Actually had an opportunity to be there during the time that they had their elections, which were in 2008, around the same time we had our elections, and I played a big role in making sure there was ample security presence around those polling places there in my area of operations in Iraq.
Tell us about, did you receive any awards while you were in the military?
Absolutely, yes. For my time in Iraq as a leader, leading troops in Iraq, I was awarded the Bronze Star Medal.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the Bronze Star Medal is?
So the Bronze Star Medal is it's a medal that is awarded for exceptional meritorious service, and it's only awarded to people who serve in a leadership capacity in a combat zone. So it's basically you have to be you actually have to be participating in a war, and you have to be in a leadership role, and then you have to do something that is exceptional or stands out that would allow you to get that award. That actually comes directly from the Secretary of the Army.
Now, what was the leadership role that you had in the Army?
So my last role was actually the role involved being an advisor to an Iraqi infantry unit. So what that meant was oftentimes I would be the senior American during operations, and sometimes involved thousands of soldiers. And my role specifically was to be there with the senior staff of an Iraqi battalion and help advise them. I was also responsible for bringing what we would call American resources to the table. So if there was a need to either have some backup, like fire support backup for the operation that was going on, or if there was a need for additional medical support, I would have to be the one who really coordinated those types of things during the actual conflict, because a lot of times those American resources needed to talk to an American on the ground, and I would be in that role to sort of bring those resources to help our Iraqi partners when they were engaged in that fight.
So after you got out of the military, what did you do then?
So when I got out of the military, I really wanted to get back to, when I went to West Point, I actually studied computer science, and I wanted to get back into something that allowed me to connect with the tech world. my first position when I left the military was actually working in the world's largest automated pharmacy. So at the time, so it was a really remarkable company that was actually considered one of the most innovative companies by Fortune magazine. It was one of the 5 most innovative companies. It was on a list with Apple and Nike and others, mainly because of the way that it was distributing pharmaceuticals to people using a very automated process, and everybody could order the meds online, and it went through an almost completely automated process. During a shift that I would work, we would put out about 10,000 prescriptions during an 8-hour shift. Overall, the facility put out over 1 million prescriptions every week without a large footprint, so it was able to really drive down the cost of healthcare for a lot of people. So it was a very innovative company to work for, and my role specifically there was I was responsible for quality assurance during the evening shift. So a lot of times when a lot of the senior leaders in the company went home, I was there in charge on the floor of the facility, identifying problems. I had a team of people who would identify problems, and then we would have to investigate and figure out what was going on and fix it and make sure that those problems didn't occur again, which oftentimes involved changing procedures and retraining people in order to make sure that those problems didn't reoccur.
Okay. Did you continue your education after you got after West Point, the Army? Did you get a secondary degree?
So actually, so after I moved on, and throughout the past 10 years, it's almost 11 years now that I've been out of the Army, I've sort of progressed to positions of greater responsibility, and along the way I went through the executive MBA program at Villanova University, which was a part-time program that I actually worked the whole time I was in that program, and it basically augmented what I was doing in the real world, but at the same time just gave me a lot deeper knowledge and understanding about how to manage large organizations. So graduating from Villanova with my MBA in 2015 just really gave me another boost to my career that allowed me to take it to another level and helped me get to the place where I am today.
Besides running, what do you do to earn a living right now?
So currently I work for a company called Rico, which is a Global 500 technology company. And specifically what we do is we provide organizations, usually larger, complex organizations. My role specifically over the past few years has been to work with government agencies and integrate new systems into government agencies. So it's all about integrating complex systems into complex organizations. And our goal is to improve their cybersecurity first and foremost, but also to make the organization more efficient and more sustainable. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about solutions that integrate both hardware, software, and professional services, which is often always required to come together as a package in order to really make an organization elevate to a new level of being able to operate at a higher level in terms of how efficient their operations are, but also making sure that everything is safe and secure and that they're not able to get hacked.
So tell us a little bit about why you're running for the Supervisor of Election role.
I was motivated to run. I'm somebody who's really, as I've spoken about before, I've done a lot of things, but I've never been involved in politics before. So the reason I got involved in politics was that I saw that there was just a need for a different skill set, in particular with this office. So after the 2018 race, through the circumstances of things that happened in 2018, we ended up having an opening. And it triggered me to kind of think about what competencies does the Supervisor of Elections need to have. And it occurred to me that a lot of the problems we hear about with regards to the Supervisor of Elections office really comes down to technology. So it's really a problem with either not having the right equipment or not having the right systems in place, or you have the right systems, but they're not being implemented the right way. For example, you could say a situation like what we saw in Georgia, where for one thing, they should not have had the touchscreen technology in place to begin with, but then that they picked the wrong systems to put in place. They didn't implement them the right way. They didn't maintain them the right way. There's just a lot of problems around technology.
Okay.
The Iowa caucuses just recently this spring, they brought in this app, which the app was not ready for prime time, and even then they didn't really integrate they didn't have people download the app. They didn't have people properly trained on how to use it, and it caused this huge debacle. So you see these things happen over and over again. We saw it before 2018 and we've seen it since then. So that's really what triggered this idea in my mind that somebody with my background, somebody who has a deep and long-standing career dealing with technology, dealing with these complicated systems, could come in and could actually run that office the right way and could actually make sure that we're integrating the systems the right way and make sure we actually get it right the first time.
Do you think we're gonna have any issues this year with the elections?
I think it's a certainty. There's a few things that are playing into this. One is the fact that there was, that there were these attempts to infiltrate our system back in 2016, and there's questions about whether or not how successful they were, but nevertheless, we're certain that there will be at least attempts, and honestly, we haven't taken the steps that we needed to take to make sure that those attempts aren't successful. So, we're just not where we need to be. We've probably gone past the point now where we can really get the right systems in place in time for November. So in my opinion, there's a certainty that at least there'll be an attempt to attack our systems in some way and try to make a difference in our elections that way through hacking. And then of course there's COVID-19, which is going to cause a huge influx, especially here in the state of Florida. There's going to be a lot more people who are going to choose to vote by mail. And because there has been political resistance to people voting by mail, we haven't really done everything we need to do as far as getting the proper systems and the proper infrastructure in place to be able to handle that onslaught of vote by mail ballots. And we're gonna see problems around that as well.
What is one or two things you would change in the office if you are elected?
So I think that the biggest thing for me has to do around the cybersecurity piece. I just really don't think we've done enough, and I think there's a lot more that we need to do. One experience I had early on that just really validated this decision to run for Supervisor of Elections was that I went in July of 2019 and I sat down with some of the senior leaders at the Supervisor of Elections office. And I discovered that still at that point, almost a year after the 2018 elections and after we knew about the attempt to hack by a method known as spear phishing, that our Supervisor of Elections office hadn't put basic protocols in place to protect the organization from a spear phishing attack. And what that really goes to show is that you have to have leadership who understands these problems, who understands the threat, and then and invigorates the organization to make the changes that they need to make. So that would be number one. The second thing I would change is that I would focus a lot more on increasing voter turnout. I don't believe that has been a focus of the office in the past. I think the office has primarily focused on other issues, but we would create more of an orientation towards doing things that will specifically help drive higher voter turnout. And specifically, I think that improving voter education around our vote by mail system and how using our vote by mail system can benefit them, but also making the vote by mail system more user friendly for the voters so that they feel comfortable with that system.
You mentioned COVID. How's your campaign adjusting to this COVID issue? Because obviously this is the first time running, so
Yeah.
What are you doing specifically? What challenges are you having? Do you think you're going to face all the challenges?
Yeah. So one thing I think that has worked well for me is that initially in the early days of the campaign, I decided to take a little bit more of a focus towards the digital realm, and especially on the social media side, focusing on building up my presence in social media and building up a following that way. And with COVID, it sort of shifted the landscape of the campaign so that pretty much all of the effort that's out there has been shifted into that space. And with that shifting into that space, I am a mile ahead of all of my competitors, which makes me feel like I now have a stronger chance. I actually do believe I'm going to win, and I believe even more so that I'm going to win because of the fact that social media plays such a big role, and I have such a huge lead, a big head start on all my competitors in that arena.
This is the first time you're running, right?
It is my first. It is my first time running. So yeah.
So you're running against a few people that have run a few campaigns in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a bunch of people who have a long history in politics and have done a lot of things, you know, and have run for a lot of different things. So it almost kind of says, you know, are you really focused on this? Is this supervisor of elections really something that you're focused on or not? You know, that's sort of, you know, what I see about these people who've been in politics forever.
So you're not a career politician?
I'm not, no. It's specifically that I see there's an issue in this particular area. There's a need for a different type of person to be an elections official than what we've had traditionally in the past. And I believe that I am the right fit for this role at this time, and that's why I've decided to run.
So you mentioned social media, and I know you have a few things that you want to discuss. There are other things that you want to mention, but we're not going to have a chance to discuss them here. But can you tell people your social media platform, your IG page, Twitter page, Facebook, your website, so they can know exactly the list of things that you plan to do if you get elected?
Absolutely. And I think the key is elect Joe Scott. Remember that, because that's also my website, electjoescott.com. And also Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is my handle is @electjoescott. So you can find me there on all platforms.
Okay. Any emails that people can reach out to you, fundraising, stuff like that?
Absolutely. My email is joe@electjoescott.com. And I should mention that I have a YouTube page as well.
And what's the YouTube page?
The YouTube page is also Elect Joe
Scott. Is there anything else you want to tell the public about you, your campaign? Because this is an opportunity for the people to get to know you a little bit. Because obviously you're not a career politician, so you know most of the politicians out there, people kind of know them. So you're new on the scene, so
so basically, you know, what I feel like is really key here is really two things. So it has to do with that technology experience. It's about improving the voter experience and improving voter turnout here in Broward County. And in order to do that and do that safely, you need somebody who's a professional with strong technology experience. But this is also a serious leadership position. So we need somebody with strong leadership background. I've been a leader for 20 years in various capacities, had an opportunity to really learn and hone my leadership skills over a number of years, as well as through serious educational credentials, graduating from West Point, graduating from Villanova with an MBA. And I believe that's what makes me the strongest candidate for Supervisor of Elections, that I just have the right background for what this role requires. And I hope that the voters will see that the same way. I believe that they will, and I hope I can count on your support.
Just a few minor questions before we end. How long have you been in Broward?
So I originally became a resident of Broward in 2002. I was still serving in the military. My mom actually retired from Broward County School. She was actually a teacher for over 40 years.
Here in Broward County?
Yeah, here in Broward County. She retired from Broward County Public Schools. So like I mentioned, with my background, I did move around quite a bit, and I moved here full-time in 2014.
So your mother, what was she a teacher? Middle school, high school, grade school?
So she was actually a special ed teacher. She finished up at the Quest Center, which is a school for disabled, that specifically caters to disabled students, as an assistant principal there. But she was a classroom teacher for 25 years and retired right here in Broward County.
And your father?
My father was a sergeant major in the U.S. Army. He retired from the Army with 22 years. So, you know, I was an Army brat, grew up moving around. I'll tell you, Broward County is the only home I've ever known. Even though I moved around a lot, there was never a place that I was planted. And I've had a chance to see a lot of the world, and I know that Broward County is the home for me, and it's the only place that'll be home from now on.
So your father was an enlisted man, is that correct?
Was, yeah. He
All
was
right, because I know a little bit of the difference, because when you said sergeant major, that means he was enlisted, correct? And where you were an officer when you
That's
got
right.
it. Okay.
Yeah. So he was enlisted man for 22 years, and then I went the officer route, and I was an officer and finished as a captain in the Army.
And how many years did you do in the Army?
5 years after West Point. So West Point is a 4-year experience, and then I spent 5 years in the force after that.
So do you count that as service when you, and I'm just asking because it's really, the 4 years at West Point, is that considered time served in the military, or is that schooling, or is it?
It's schooling, yeah.
Or it's schooling,
yeah.
but it's not considered time served in the military.
It's you. So when you're at West Point, you are active duty, but it doesn't count towards retirement.
Oh, so you're active duty. So if you need to go to war, you go, but they don't pay you. Is that?
Yeah. Well, I think if that happens, so there was only really one time that they did that with the cadets, and that was during World War II.
Okay.
So what they actually did was they had the cadets graduate early, and then they sort of switched over to the other side.
Okay.
So you wouldn't. So if they did need to send you to war, you would become that time would count.
Okay. So it's about 9 years all military schooling and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Right?
everything together is 9 years.
I think there was just a ceremony, right? Well, I saw the president speaking somewhere, right?
Yes.
When did they graduate, the cadets?
Cadets, that just happened maybe a week ago. Maybe it was about last weekend, I want to say, that they did the graduation. They actually had, it was actually crazy because it was the first social distancing graduation. So it looked a lot strange to people who see the graduation every year. But they did some things to kind of make it a good experience for them. But overall, it was a very strange situation for them. They had to come back in social distance for 2 weeks. And,
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
yeah, it was strange.
Joe, we want to thank you for first coming on Sundays for the interview, second for your service to the country. Obviously, us as a group endorsed you for this race, so we wish you all the best. We think you're the best candidate based on what you just told us, because I personally know a little bit more during the interview. So we wish you all the best. Please tell people before we end the date of the election, early voting, and all that information that people need to know.
Absolutely. So early voting will start on August 8th, and the election day is August 18th. I encourage everyone to go ahead and request a vote by mail ballot. You can go to browardsoe.org right now, and there's a pop-up that'll guide you through the process of requesting a vote by mail ballot. Please do that now, because with COVID-19 and everything that's going on, it's really the right time to use the vote by mail system. And if you want, you can actually take that ballot into an early voting site if you don't trust putting it in the mail.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it, and happy Father's Day again.
Happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you.